We begin our live stream a little bit with delay. Since we focus on consciousness this time, I would like you to embody the horizontal depth in your head, pure consciousness. And just to say, even though we are not in the current teaching going behind the headspace, if your consciousness is unstable, it's always beneficial to go slightly behind. And then you simply relax and allow pure consciousness to expand in your head. The subject of the live stream, as you know, is going back to the beginning. It's not about starting your practice all over again, but to get in touch with what is actually happening in the beginning, because that beginning is not simply in your past, it's also part of your present. And if you do not understand that beginning, you cannot understand your present. And nobody does understand the beginning. That's a big problem. It's like that most important piece of the puzzle of the spiritual evolution is simply missing or entirely out of place. And the beginning is how self enters our body and that place of contact where we, for the first time, become conscious. Which is that basic sense of awareness and that basic sense of me that allows us to recognize that we actually exist. And that one is experienced in your eyes. When you have this knowledge, and it is being pointed out, then it becomes obvious. In your eyes, there are two layers of experience which overlap. One is attention, second is intelligence, which is experiencing itself as that sense of me. Even when one is entirely unconscious, it is still being the case. It's simply that sense of me and that attention are not self-aware. It's very important to know it, because if I ask you, who are you really? What would you say? Well, you could say many things. Assuming you have awakened your pure subjectivity, you could say that you are pure consciousness, for instance. You could say that you are the person, the center in the mind, and so on. So let me rephrase the question. What are you above anything else? What are you above all? What are you primarily? And what you are is that sense of me in your eyes. And because you are this primarily, that's why we call it primary me. Before I called it primary attention, which is actually the same, just the emphasis is different. Primary attention is that light of recognition, which is actually the essence of consciousness. And primary me is the intelligence, recognizing it, because that light of recognition cannot exist without intelligence. And intelligence cannot exist without sense of me. And the way intelligence creates that sense of me is by identifying with attention. Of course, it's all unconscious initially, but that is the mechanism of how it happens. Having understood that your main identity is in your eyes, at least at first, allows you to grasp what it is that you are doing on the path. It empowers you spiritually, because you know you're that predominant sense of self, which you are, your main identity. But additionally, which is very much important for all of you, is that it will allow you to understand what is actually the problem later on? What blocks or is jeopardizing your further evolution? What is actually standing in the way to your further evolution? And the answer is the same. It is the same one. So it is your power to have your primary me, without which you could not exist, obviously. And it's also the source of your of consciousness. But it's also an obstacle due to the fact that it is pulling you back to itself. So, for instance, you work with pure consciousness, but primary me is pulling you back to itself because it wants to be in the center. It does not want to relinquish its control. But you don't know it because that identity is actually unconscious. Even when you make it conscious, just by, becoming aware of it, as we are doing now, still on a very subconscious level, it's completely unconscious. Like you don't really know that part of yourself. What does it do? How important it is? And how the fact that it is failing to transform, how this is constituting the main obstruction in your evolution. I see people, I see my students. It's this thing, this mechanism, this unconscious identification with the primary me is just refusing to change. And there is a justification for that because it is important. It's also the center of the mind, because when that primary attention goes into the mind, it begins to think, and it can even create a center in the mind as the person, which is an extension, type of emanation of the primary attention in the prefrontal cortex. And it is looking at the world, because it is also the seer. Seer is in the eyes. These are the main functions, initially, in people of primary attention, that it is the thinker and it is the seer. It's also a center of personality. Through the mind, it's processing all the mental and emotional stuff that is happening in personality, which also causes one to be even more identified with that center, because everyone is very identified with personality. It's an emotional thing, survival thing, security thing, and egotistic thing. That ego created through this is just obsessed with itself, so it does not want to give up its control. And even if you know that pure consciousness is deeper, it represents a deeper space in consciousness than the primary me, you don't believe it, or the primary me does not believe it, because it thinks that it is the most important. And it is a funny thing, because actually it is the most important. But not in a way it is thinking that it is the most important. It actually can become the most important, come to the forefront of importance when it surrenders. It's addiction to itself. When you talk to people, who is talking? It's primary me. Looking at others, trying to communicate through the mind. It's the same one. And that one, for you to not just to enter a spiritual path, but actually to evolve in a harmonious way, and to truly progress, that one has to transform. The first step in that transformation is, of course, primary me becoming conscious of itself. Are you conscious of your primary me in your eyes? There's no actual practice here of cultivating a center of primary me. It is done in a more subtle way, that you need to be gently, as if indirectly, one with it, because you are that identity. You need to be in touch with it. When you talk to people, you need to know that it is the same me which is talking. When you think in your mind, it is the same me which expresses itself as the thinker. When you are dealing with emotional stuff, it is the same me which is dealing with that. There's really nobody else. That's the thing. And the reason for this is that there is only one center of intelligence, one thinker. You can experience yourself on other levels, in pure consciousness, in your body, in your heart, but there's only one center of intelligence, or one thinking of center of intelligence that is capable of thinking. Because intelligence also enters other centers, but in these other centers, it cannot think in a way the thinker is thinking. So are you conscious of your primary me? So, becoming conscious of primary me is the first step in its transformation, which is very important because it also allows us to reach a mastery over the mind. Because if one does not have a center in me, one cannot separate oneself from thoughts. And this is where the whole human mess begins. Everybody is simply lost in the mind constantly. A terrible situation. So that me has to become conscious. But the second element is not only it has to recognize itself as a presence in your eyes, but it also has to meet itself existentially. Because what it means to be me, it's difficult to say, it's difficult to put it in words, because it's not a matter of describing it conceptually, it is a matter of feeling. You need to feel the mystery of me, which you are. That me is very important spiritually, because it is where self, the supreme self, is recognizing itself in the body as the center of intelligence. He becomes human. Primary attention by itself is not human. It needs intelligence, personal intelligence, which identifies itself as me. And that me is actually the first experience of our soul. It needs to feel itself in order to access its soulfulness. Because the fact that you just feel the sense of me is not yet really a soul. It can become a soul if it is met properly. So you need to feel that sense of me, that primary me, deeper, with sensitivity, with intimacy. It's very important because it is the center of your existence. It is the one who wants to evolve spiritually. It is the one who wants to be happy, wants to be well. It is the one that seeks security. You can experience all these things all over yourself, but actually it's all in the primary me. Why it wants to be happy? Because it wants to be well. It has this instinct to be well, to pursue the sense of wellness. And to identify suffering, fear, and so forth as the opposites to that wellness. So it is that primary me in your eyes that is actually the seeker. But to become a seeker, it has to reach a certain level of evolution. And it's all about the beginning. What is actually making you a seeker? Are you really a seeker? Are you really on the spiritual path? What is your original motive? Have you forgotten? Do you still remember the original motive? The original reason? You need to remember. You need to remember your beginning. And that beginning is in your present. It has to develop intelligence. has to become wiser, has to begin to ask questions and so forth. And eventually it has to identify something of the most importance, which is its spiritual longing. Because it knows, when it's able to detach itself from all that human reality, from all that construct in which people live, just taking care of their daily existence, pursuing their superficial sense of happiness, trying to survive at any cost, trying to, reach certain basic emotional fulfillment. So when one is able to disassociate oneself internally from all of that, not because these things do not matter, but because they are just on the surface of our existence. There are much more important things that matter. Then one is able to feel that one is missing something fundamental. Something is lacking. Something is not quite right. That whole reality is not quite right. That you are somehow in the wrong place, in the wrong world. That you are a stranger to this realm of forgetfulness, which is the human realm. I'm not speaking about being able to identify the ordinary suffering that I want to reach enlightenment, I want to meet God so that I can be in this eternal happiness. Not about that. It's not about wanting to be more happy. It's about wanting to bring back something that is missing in one's own soul, which is the light of me, which is the which is pure subjectivity. Because pure subjectivity is actually reality, representation of reality. And all the rest, which is not of pure subjectivity, is the unreality, it is the illusion, it is the forgetfulness, it is the hallucination, it is it's a hell. That's what it is. Because when you are born into hell. Not having yourself is hell. Hell is not a description of the outer world, it's a description of how you experience yourself, or the lack of the ability to experience yourself in a real way. So the spiritual longing, which is the touch of God in us, that is at the beginning of it all. But then it has to translate itself in a proper action, which is entering the spiritual path. And then intelligence has to match it so that one actually knows what one is doing, with what one is supposed to do with this longing. And that's why you also need spiritual guidance, because nobody is that smart to figure it out by oneself. You need support. So that you can step by step fully bring back yourself to you. But things often do not work so smoothly or in such a linear way. That's why, even though you have entered the path, even though that you have awakened states beyond the mind, that part which initiates your path, which is the seeker, is still not transformed enough. It's not surrendered. Just refuses to surrender because he's afraid, because he is stubbornly attached to itself. So now, if you go to pure consciousness, embody that space. And what is pure consciousness? It is your soul. Pure me of consciousness is actually the soul. And the reason for this is that the primary me initially does not have enough space to embody its own soulfulness. That's why it needs to expand, needs to create those spaces of expansion through pure attention. Well, the soul can be met, which is pure consciousness. Pure consciousness is your soul. Because your soul is born at the point of meeting between individual and the universal. You see, as important as primary me is limited, because there's no space, it's not really happy with itself. It does not have like a comfortable space to be, to abide. As you know, awareness in the eyes is not, it can be felt easily as too intense. The first answer to the question, who am I, is the primary me, or primary attention. Primary me is more accurate. And it is a good answer, it is the right answer, but it's not a particularly happy answer. Okay, I know who I am, but I am not feeling that exhilarated by it, because that presence of primary me is quite limited at the start. Very important, mind you, but also limited. That's why one cannot just stay there. Let's say someone awakens primary me and says, oh, I have discovered who I am. Do you want to live there forever in that limited presence? Energetically? No, you don't. That's why in our path, the next logical step that we make is awakening of pure consciousness. Suddenly, oh, all the space opens up. You feel that relief, you feel that bliss, you feel that expansiveness. For the first time in your life, you're actually comfortable with yourself. But we have an issue here that the primary me is still separate from pure consciousness. We experience ourselves as, as two spaces. And the primary me is not much of a space. Anyway, as two regions of consciousness, one in the front, one behind. And it's not just that. They're in conflict. And particularly the primary me is in conflict because primary me is also the troublemaker, the disturber, the disturber of pure consciousness because of his living in personality. So we have the next step here in that process of transformation, which is having open pure consciousness. Primary me has to surrender further. He's not surrendering in terms of, going down or going back. He is surrendering by giving pure consciousness priority. He agrees that pure consciousness becomes our main identity, and he becomes a secondary identity. And that is very important, not just for the sake of establishing pure consciousness or embodying it deeper, but also of that transformation of the primary me. So it begins to experience himself in a higher way, such as in a transparent way. He is no longer so intense. He becomes more gentle. So when you are, and please, as I am talking, you experiment with that. Feel yourself in pure consciousness. Your eyes are open. I recommend you have your eyes open in this talk. But the one in the front is gentle and is transparent. And the only way to assure it is that the weight of identity is in pure consciousness. Otherwise, you will be pulled to the front too much. The additional transformation that is happening here is not only that primary me is experiencing himself in a more pleasant way, but the very fact that he is experiencing himself from the soul, which is pure consciousness, he begins to experience himself as an extension of that soul, and therefore get in touch with his own soulfulness. He's no longer so crude, so intense, so controlling, so difficult. He can feel himself as something beautiful, someone beautiful. And now we have a situation that primary me has to be more active in the world. This is where the trouble begins. This is where everybody regresses. Because suddenly we forget everything. We forget pure consciousness. We forget our soul, in fact. We forget our soul. We become just like machines again. Human, mental, psychological machines. Because to assure our survival, to assure our security, to assure that we are, be able to interact with other people, that other people like us, that we are somehow able to gather some kind of a strength in connecting to other people, assert ourselves, and so forth. He takes control back entirely. And then you find yourself again stuck in your eyes, in that claustrophobic reality, that unpleasant reality, that undignified reality, without your soul, because you have forgot everything. And why you have forgotten everything? One reason is psychological, emotional, which is the obvious one to point out. Because the only way you feel safe in this world is by assuming this overly controlling position in your eyes. But there are also other reasons. There's certain missing link in intelligence. Meaning the reason that you act like this, that you allow yourself to lose your soul, is because there's the discontinuity of intention coming from the fact that even though on the conscious level you know all these things, but on the unconscious level, that part of the primary me, which is unconscious, just does not connect to that conscious knowledge. It has a mind of its own. That animalistic mind, in fact. It's very animalistic. So there's something in that intelligence of the primary me that failed to transform, and I would like you to observe yourself and to make the necessary effort to bring consciousness there. So that your intention is pure and your intention is one. That there is no conflict of intentions in you. Even if your personality is triggered, even if you are triggered emotionally, and humans are just humans, they are so much living in their personalities, they just don't know any other way. And even if you awaken pure consciousness, that part of you which is like others actually has not changed. And it has to change. And the only way it can change, if you truly love your soul, if you have devotion to your light, only if you have, in fact, devotion to be well. Because you lose your light, you go back into a terrible condition. So it's completely illogical, you see, that one would choose to lose oneself, to lose that well-being, spiritual well-being, just because on the unconscious level, one still is identified with that belief system from the past, which is, well, we pursue our human well-being versus spiritual well-being in a very primitive way. So there are two different well-beings which are split apart. They are not in harmony. They are conflicting each other's. And the interesting thing is that you don't have to renounce your personality. You don't have to renounce your your need to take care of yourself on the human level. You don't even need to renounce the fact that you perhaps feel shy or unconfident with other people. You don't have to renounce none of these things. In fact, you don't have to renounce anything. You just want to be well. You just want to be your soul. Because when you are experiencing this world from your soul, from your pure consciousness, you can do all these things that you usually do. You can exercise mental focus. You can exercise visual focus. You can have human emotions. You can feel shy with other people. Not a big deal. But one thing you must not do is to lose your light. Because from pure consciousness, the primary me can function not only as efficiently as before we had pure consciousness, but much more efficiently. Because now it is more comfortable, it is more transparent, it's free from the mind, at least it can choose to stop thinking, and it can feel more what is out there, all this world, other people, because actually now it can feel, because it can see. Because you see, the primary me is the seer indeed, but in an ordinary condition, he is a blind seer. He cannot really see because he has no space. He's just stuck in this picture, in this externals. He's doesn't have the vision through which he could see. Not vision in terms of understanding of this reality, but the spiritual vision. And the spiritual vision for the seer means that he is looking at the world from pure consciousness. Now he can see, he can feel, he can actually relate to the world in a real sense of this world. Because that can happen only from pure consciousness. Primary me is the beginning. The beginning of consciousness, the beginning of us. And so my question to you is, what is your relationship with that beginning? Why is this beginning right now? Are you really unified? Are you connected properly inside yourself? They're just disjoint parts of yourself floating in the space, conflicting with themselves. You need to look at it. For, it will help you to identify your difficulties on the path. It will help you to gain a higher self-knowledge about who you truly are. And it will help you to experience yourself much deeper on a spiritual level as your soul. You need to become truly conscious. If the primary me is controlling you, if you are excessively identified with it, in conflict with your soul, it means you are not conscious. And there's no real excuse for it. It is an indulgence in your past tendencies, and you have the responsibility to stop it, to change it. If you want to be truly well, truly free, if you want to be worthy, living in the light of your soul. Never judge yourself, criticize yourself, don't create any guilt. If you notice falling back, going back, regressing, always love yourself, but never indulge in those tendencies in you which are against you, against your soul. You notice yourself doing this? Stop. If you begin to judge yourself, it's even worse because you are actually perpetuating that sense of false self. The path has to be pure. Do not leave psychological traces in whatever you do on the spiritual path. Because this is what personality is doing, perpetuating. You made a mistake, correct it, get back on the right track. When there are difficulties, just be patient with yourself. All you can do is to do your best. And that's enough, as long as you are doing your best. If you are not doing your best, start doing your best from now on. Because it's always the present. It's always what you will do with this next moment in your life. Because it is the next moment that is the true life. And let it be so. I will see you at the next retreat online.